promoted to captain. Mark returned to Field Services Division, where he's responsible for overseeing and managing the Patrol Bureau, Dispatch Bureau, Court Security, Transportation Bureau, and the contract cities of Windsor and Sonoma. Please welcome Captain Mark Essick.
Thank you, Chris. I always feel so welcome when I come to Rotary. And that speaks volumes about what type of group you are. Joanne, for her help getting me here today, the warm welcome I got from Chris when I walked in the door, and Michael as I walked in the door. It always is nice to be in front of Rotarians. I always feel like I'm among friends. And I have special thanks to Maureen Merrill. She is really kind of my introduction to Rotary as a young Windsor Police Deputy, Windsor Police Sergeant. Windsor Rotary is very involved in public safety awards, and so I started meeting Maureen when we were doing public safety awards for some of our deputies that worked at Windsor PD. So thank you all, and thank you for making me feel very welcome, and thank you for that introduction. So I'm going to try to keep it very interesting today to keep you guys involved in this conversation. But I want to start out just by talking to you a little bit about my bona fides, or my resume to be here. As Chris read off some of my accomplishments, it's nice to hear those things, and it's a little embarrassing sometimes. Thank you, Michael. But I really want to kind of get back to the roots. I did grow up in Novato, and I know Novato and Petaluma seem to have this little bit of adversarial relationship. Who's better, Novato or Petaluma? And of course I came from Novato, just south of here. And we always thought we were better, right? But this time of year, what really strikes me about coming to Petaluma this time of the year is that it's fall. And as a kid growing up in Novato in the 1970s, where did we go for school shopping? We went to Mervyn's, right? So we made our annual trip to Mervyn's in Petaluma right before school started to do our school clothes shopping. And so it's always, whenever I come back to Petaluma in the fall, I always think about going to Mervyn's. I also think about my mom. My mom was a school teacher for many years at Pengrove School. So even though we lived in Novato, we spent a lot of time in Petaluma. So it's nice to be here. I'm a lifelong resident of the North Coast. I grew up in Novato. I spent the rest of my life after college here either in Santa Rosa. I currently live in Cloverdale. And there's no other place that I would rather be than to live in this area. It's really beautiful. You guys got to hear a little bit about my bio, so I don't want to rehash what Chris said, but I just want to kind of recap a couple things. As a law enforcement captain, it's been a great journey for me. I started in 1994 in the jail. I learned about what it was like to work in a jail. I'd never done that before. I'd worked at juvenile hall, learned a little bit about juvenile detention. Sorry, I see you craning your neck to see me there. Step out from behind the sign. And so it was my kind of first exposure of what it was like to be around people who maybe grew up differently or had some different experiences than I did growing up. I was thrust into a jail at the age of 24 and learned how to talk to some folks that were, kind of hardened. They'd been to prison, they'd had rough lives, and it really opened my eyes to the other side of the criminal justice system, one that I had never been involved with growing up. And then I later had some great opportunities to excel at the sheriff's office, and I went over and became a deputy sheriff, and I had some great experiences there. One of my first assignments was in Roseland, working at the Roseland Community-Oriented Policing, and that really kind of laid the foundation of what I think my career has been. In Roseland, we had a sergeant who was running the show, and he was very involved in community policing. And in a nutshell, I mean, we hear the word community policing all the time, but in a nutshell, what is community policing? It is knowing who the cop is in your beat, and it's having that relationship with the cop in the beat, that you know their name, they know you, they know the problems in the area, and they know that if there is a problem, they know who to talk to. Because I think all of you realize as experienced leaders in your community that we can't solve problems simply by arresting our people, right? That's not the only solution. When we have problems in our community, if it's a noise complaint, if it's a quality of life issue, it's a community issue that we all have to work on together. That means business owners, other government agencies, and the police. So community-oriented policing really in its crux is working together as a community to solve problems. Now, that doesn't mean that bad things happen. Last year, a little over a year ago at this time, we had a bank robbery in Windsor. And some of you may have read about it in the news or heard about it. It was awful. We had an armored car guard who was shot with an AK-47 at near point-blank range. He was right in Safeway, the Safeway shopping center in Windsor. He was laying on the ground. He was about to die. He was bleeding out. We had community members rush up to him to help him. We had a suspect take off in a car, and they were armed, and we had police cars pursuing the bad guys. We had people gravely hurt at the scene. And if it was not for a young man who was and eventually went on to become an Eagle Scout, but a young man who was a Boy Scout was there with some other folks. They applied direct pressure to this man's wound and saved this armored car guy's life. And recently, we had an award ceremony at the sheriff's office, and in retrospect, we got to bring all these people in who were part of that event. And I think all of you know that that event ended up turning out well. The guard lived, we caught the bad guys, and no one else got hurt. But it was great to bring in these people to our award ceremony and get to recognize this young kid who got to, firsthand help save a man's life. So it was really incredible. So that's kind of that community policing. Bad things do happen, but we develop those relationships with the community so we can get their help and we can help them. As the law enforcement captain, there's just a couple things I do want to point out to you that I get to do that's really unique. We have two contract cities in this county, the town of Windsor and the town of Sonoma. Those two cities or towns, town in the case of Windsor, they've chosen to contract with the sheriff's office for police services. And a lot of people ask, well, why would somebody do that? Well, they do it because of economies of scale. In Windsor, for example, they have 17 deputies, and they patrol a population of about 28,000 people. And they do it for about $5 million a year, which of course is a lot of money, but if they were to do that on their own and not have the sheriff's office, there's a lot of big capital things they would have to be a police department. A radio system. So the sheriff's office has a radio system that serves the entire county. It's a multi-million-dollar system. We have 11 different radio sites on mountains throughout this county. Each radio site that we have costs about $1 million to build out originally, and then to maintain over the course of a year costs us about another $1 million to maintain all of them. A radio center where we have dispatchers sitting in a room taking those 911 calls. Property and evidence, right? Every time we find a piece of property, a missing bike, a stolen bike that turns up in a creek and someone turns it in, we have to store all that stuff. So the great thing the sheriff's office provides to some of these smaller towns in respect to community policing, into contract policing, is that we absorb all those in our economy of scale. So they can get away with a very small footprint office. So in Windsor, it's basically a storefront office with some offices there. They don't have to have a radio system. They don't have to have the evidence storage. So it saves them money in that respect in a lot of ways. So it is kind of great to be the law enforcement captain, that I have so many diverse things underneath of me that I get to participate in. Town of Windsor. And both of those towns are the chiefs that are installed in both those towns are lieutenants. So at the sheriff's office, we take a lieutenant and we designate them the chief of that office. So in Windsor, it's Carlos Basurdo. In Sonoma, it's Brett Sackett. They're both actually sheriff's lieutenants that we've just designated as chiefs to manage that. And I'm very fortunate that I have 9 lieutenants who work for me, and all of them are super talented, and they manage a variety of different programs. So, I'm going to make it a little challenging here for you. What I want to talk to you about today, after getting through that part there, is I want to talk to you about homelessness and mental health problems in our county. So, in this room here, I guarantee there's somebody in this room who has a loved one or a family member who suffers from mental illness. And mental illness comes in a lot of different forms. Typically, when we talk about mental health or mental issues, we're talking about serious and persistent mental health issues. Those are issues that affect someone's daily life. The big ones: major depression, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, major anxiety. I think it is a spare the air day, so I'm a little, I can see it, the horizon up there, it's a little smoky. So I can, oh, thank you. So we all have loved ones, or we know somebody who's probably affected by mental illness. And for most people in our county, they are receiving care, either through their health insurance or their family. But I'm going to give you a quick quiz here. Of the major mental disorders that affect people's daily lives and their daily functioning, I want to see if anybody can give me a guess of what percent of the population are affected by these kind of disorders. Yes?
5%.
A little high, 1%. So 1% of our population, actually it's a little bit below 1, say 0.95% of our population is affected by severe and persistent mental disorders. Really small population. So in Sonoma County, we have about 500,000 people. So roughly, we have about 5,000 people in this county who are affected by mental illness. Of those 5,000 people, the vast majority of them are receiving treatment, and that treatment can come in many forms. It can come in the form of counseling. Predominantly in our society, it comes in the form of medication, especially for some of the major disorders. So those people are on medication that help them live a normal day. So what I want to talk to you about that really has a key interest to the Sheriff's Office and public safety and our justice partners in this county is mental illness, homelessness in our jail. Okay? So Sonoma County Sheriff's Office operates, unfortunately, one of the biggest mental health institutions in the county. The biggest mental health institution in the county is our jail. By law, the Sheriff's Office has to accept all prisoners. So no matter where a person gets arrested in this county, Petaluma, Cotati, Cloverdale, once that person's been arrested for whatever charge they've been arrested for, by law, they have to be booked into our jail. So we are the receivers of all these arrests. So as you can see, I'm going to start to paint a picture here about policy. The Sheriff's Office can make policies about mental illness and our inmates, but we are really kind of at the mercy of the agencies that are arresting people and bringing them to us. So we got that roughly 1% of our population in this county is affected by mental illness. Inmates in our jail. Anybody want to guess how many inmates are currently housed in our jail? No? No one's going to be bold? 85. I wish it was 85. 1,119. About 1,100. And that's been our average daily population since realignment. So realignment can, yes sir?
What is the capacity of the jail?
Well, that's a good question too. Our capacity is about 1,200. So we're right there busting at the seams. I could talk about this all day, and I realize I do have a time limit, so I'm going to go over a little bit quickly. So when Governor Brown passed realignment, it took a lot of our state prison inmates and pushed them back into county jails. Up until about 2010, our jail population was sitting around 800 people. But as a result of realignment, we started having to take some of these state prison inmates into our jail, and we now have people in a county jail who are serving up to 12-year prison terms locally in a county jail. County jails were never designed or operated in such a way that we should be housing people for 12 years. County jails have always been a short-term detention center where someone goes through the court process and through their arraignment and is determined whether or not they're guilty or not, and then a disposition is reached. So county jails are designed and built for short-term housing. So having people in there for 12 years is ridiculous. It's stretching us at our seams. So of those 1,100 inmates, this is going to blow your mind, I hope, in a bad way, 42% of our population in the jail qualifies as a mental health person. 42%. Huge. And of the 42% who are in our jail who suffer from mental illness, just want to make sure I get it right. So that's about 462 inmates currently in our jail suffer some form of major mental illness. And of those, we have another 200 of them that are acute. And when we say acute, they're people who are either refusing to take medication or their situation is so bad that we haven't even been able to diagnose what's going on with them. So they're so acute, they're hurting themselves, they're not eating, they're what we call gravely disabled. They cannot care for themselves. So I'm painting this really bad picture, right? Next thing I want to quiz you on, and I'm sure someone's going to know this. I'm sure we got someone here who follows this kind of stuff. It's very expensive to house an inmate in jail, right? And so the point that I'm eventually going to get to is that we need to somehow figure a way to divert these mental health inmates out of our jail and into some sort of community program, because it costs so much money for us to house them in jail. Anybody want to guess? I'm gonna go after Maureen. How much does it cost a day to house someone in our jail? 100. Well, we average it out. So we have some inmates who require very, very little care, and we're just feeding them. And then we have the inmates that need a whole lot of care. It's $154 a day to house an inmate in our jail. 154 times 1,119 every day, 365 days a year. We spend about $70 million a year running our jail. Sheriff's Office budget overall is about $179 million, and as you can see, it takes up well over a third of our budget as well. It's a huge, huge cost for us. So now that I've painted this kind of dire picture, let me tell you about some things that we're trying to do to fix it and make it better. One of the first things that we've done is we've got the courts and the probation department and the DA's office to kind of buy into a program that we call pretrial release. What often happens with folks with mental illness who get picked up for a crime, usually it's what we call a quality of life crime. When someone's suffering from a severe mental illness and they're homeless, they are going to do things that bring their attention to the police. They're going to walk into a 7-Eleven and steal some food because they're hungry. It's a crime to steal food. So the owner of the store calls the police arrest the person for petty theft. Okay, so that's how they enter the system. So that person gets booked into our jail for petty theft. Oftentimes, if they're homeless, they also typically have a bunch of warrants because maybe in the past they've been arrested and they never showed up to court. So those things start to build a cycle where they've got all these legal problems. So it may be a petty theft arrest, and then we run the person's name through the computer, and lo and behold, they've got a bunch of warrants for failure to appear and a bunch of other stuff. So that person then ends up in our jail. Do we want to house a person for a low-level misdemeanor in our jail when our jail's busting at the seams and we're spending $79 million running the jail every year? No, we don't. So we worked with the courts, probation, and the DA, and we came up with this program. It's called pretrial release. And it's essentially kind of from the old days, being released on your own recognizance. Everybody's nodding their heads, they've heard of that word before. So we are releasing these people on their own recognizance. However, we're putting some supervision in with it. So we have probation officers and correctional deputies who are assigned a caseload, and they actually monitor and check these people. It's almost like being on probation before you're on probation. So we can divert these people out of our jail system. Currently, that system is working really well. 323 people are on pretrial release. So if we did not have that, we already did the math on what our current capacity is and how many we have, we would be well over capacity in our jail if we did not have pretrial release. The other thing that we're doing is a program called EMP. So EMP is the electronic monitoring program. That is another method that we use to get people out of custody and back into the community. We basically put an ankle bracelet on someone. They have to report to a probation officer. The problem with EMP is that you have to have a home. You have to have a place to go. You have to have an apartment or a house or somewhere you can stay because there's an electronic monitoring box that your bracelet on your ankle reports back to. But we have 60 people currently out of custody on EMP. So just between those two programs, we have about 380 people that we've diverted from being in our jail. So that's important. If we didn't have that, we would be in huge trouble. The other things that we continue to work on, discharge planners. No one ever, in the old days, no one ever thought about having a discharge planner for jail. We always thought about discharge planners for hospitals, right? If you go to a hospital, you're ill, you meet with your doctor, you get treated, and before you leave, the discharge planner comes to you and says, okay, here's your follow-up appointment, here's what you're going to be doing next, here's who you need to go see. Well, we never did that to jail. We used to open, when the person's time was up in the jail, we'd open the door and say, see you later, have a nice day. And oftentimes those folks that are severely mentally ill, while those people are in our jail, we give them medication. So we have doctors in the jail who are prescribing medication for psychiatric problems. It does no good to get someone stabilized on psychiatric medication in the jail, and then the release date comes and we kick them out with no medication, no follow-up, no nothing. Within a few days, they're spiraling out of control and they're back in. It's that vicious cycle. So with discharge planning, what we're doing is we have a bunch of discharge planners, they're social workers, they're clinicians, and what they're doing is they are working with the inmate and if possible the inmate's family to plan about what's going to happen to that person when they get out of custody, follow-up appointments, prescriptions for medication so they can stay on the medication they've been prescribed, and that seems to be working really well as well. And then I think lastly, the FACT program here in Sonoma County has been a huge success. FACT stands for Forensic Assertive Community Treatment, and FACT is kind of like, I guess the best way to describe it is mental health court. So we have a special court set up and we have an agreement with the DA's office, and if someone is arrested for one of those quality of life issues that happens to be maybe petty theft and they have a severe mental illness, we get them into this kind of probation program where they have a place they can go every day and check in. It's like a check-in center. They have counselors there. They have clinicians who can administer medication, so they make sure the person's taking their medication if it's been prescribed to them. And it's really this real assertive program to keep those people on track, because what we've learned in the justice system is that when someone with mental illness gets off track, it creates a spiral, and it creates a huge drain on resources, ambulances, police, fire, and the whole rigmarole, and it costs a lot of money. So those are just a few things that we're doing with mental health in our jail and some of the challenges that we're facing as a sheriff's office and as a community. Mental health services in our county continue to lag. And I think you all probably realize that. Every day you open the newspaper, you read about mental health in our county and homelessness. There was just one other statistic I wanted to give you. Homelessness in our county is down significantly. Our high point we reached was in 2011. We had about 4,500 people unsheltered in our county. In 2016, which was our last census, it was, I think, in November or December of 2016 they did it, so it's a pretty current number. We were down to 2,900 homeless folks in our county, and 1,900 of those were what we call chronically unsheltered. So you could be homeless and be sleeping on a friend's couch, right? That would list you as a homeless person. But if you are homeless and you have nothing, you're sleeping on the ground, you're sleeping in parks, that number in this county is about 1,900. Still a huge number. And the reason is, so we talked about 42% of our jail population has mental illness. Anybody want to guess the population of our homeless who have mental health conditions? Huge, 69%. 69% of the people who are homeless have some sort of diagnosed mental health condition. So it's really huge. The other big chunk of that is, of course, substance abuse. People who are homeless tend to have substance abuse problems. It's like 26% of those who are homeless are identified as chronic substance abusers. So it's community partnerships. It's working together with Sonoma County Mental Health. It's working with other agencies. And really, I guess if I had one message that I could enforce upon you guys today to take to your local elected officials, decision makers in your community, it's that we need to continue to put resources, money, into day services or services for mentally ill folks and homeless folks to divert them out of the justice system. We're going to pay. As a community and as a society, we are going to pay for those in our community who are suffering like this. So I think for the responsible thing to do and the humane thing to do is, if we're going to pay anyway, let's pay, get the services there, and get them treated humanely out of custody, as opposed to having them in our jail, costing us millions of dollars, and really not getting that appropriate treatment they need. So I would just urge all of you that if you have any influence on your local community leaders, that you just kind of continue to hammer that message home that we need more and more community services for mentally ill and homeless. So I'm definitely out of time, and I think we might have a minute or so for a couple questions. Yes, Michael.
I'll make mine very quickly. So I remember when Sheriff Frady was there a couple years ago, and he talked about the fact we were actually outsourcing, and it was cheaper to have some people go down to Marin County, and I don't know if you have occupancy, you can keep home what the price trade-offs is. And the second part of it is that I remember Malcolm Gladwell's book, I think maybe it was What the Dogs Saw. He talked about these people that are really in bad shape, homeless, and the medical treatment that they incur can be quite high. And I just wondered, if your costs you spoke about included what might be an extraordinary medical expenses.
So I can, two-part question. The first part, out-of-county housing. We currently do not have anybody housed out-of-county, but that we just missed it by a nick. Up until 2 months ago, we had about 100 people from our jail housed out-of-county, and they were actually housed in Solano County. Solano County Jail had some capacity, which of course, so whenever a jail has capacity, they will accept inmates from another county. Of course, they're not charging us $150 a day that it costs us. They're charging us considerably more money. So it's expensive to house them out of county, and it's not convenient because we have to transport those inmates back and forth if they're going to court. And it's just not, it doesn't make great fiscal sense. We do it in emergencies. But because of some improvements we made in the electronic monitoring program and the pretrial release program, we were able to get our jail population down enough that we pulled everybody out of Solano County. So currently we just have our own inmates in this county. And then the second part of your question, who pays the health care costs when these folks are being scraped up and taken by ambulance? Well, it's all of you. It all appears in your insurance rates and it appears in your hospital bills because people go to the emergency room to be treated and they are indigent, they have no money, and those bills are not getting paid. To some respect, and I'm not an expert in the healthcare area, but there is some room where those people can be enrolled into Obamacare or Medi-Cal or Medicare type programs. It tends to offset some of those costs, but it does not recover them fully.
Hello, my name is Judy.
Hi, Judy.
Congratulations on your accomplishments.
Thank you.
And the programs you have been mentioning are in effect. What are you going to do as sheriff?
Thank you. Well, I really hit on it first, community policing. So there's a lot of things that I would like to do as sheriff. Community policing is very important to me. As I mentioned to you, it's where I got my roots. So I'm going to put 100% effort into community policing, get us back to that basic. We had what we called a COPS unit for a while, community-oriented policing program. It was only 3 or 4 deputies. And I think the misnomer that got out there is people thought, oh, you have a COPS program, so all the other 250 deputies I had working for me said, oh, I don't have to do COPS programs, so I don't have to do community-oriented policing because those 3 guys do it. And my stance as a sheriff is that, no, every single deputy that works for me is a COPS deputy. Every single person is responsible for their beat, developing those relationships, going to those events, engaging in the community. So community policing is really one of the most important things to me. Thank you.
With the capacity of the jail and the high incidence of mental health issues, what is the risk of breakouts? You know, of getting out of jail, people breaking out of the jail. How safe is the jail?
Sure, another great question. Our jail was built, the first jail was built in '89, and then we did an addition on that jail in '95. Our downtown jail, or what we call our main detention center, the big pink building on the side of the freeway, is very secure. It was designed to all the modern standards. It is a high security jail. Within that jail, we have some high security modules. It's really a long question, so I can't get to all that, but that jail is incredibly secure. Our less secure jail is our North County Detention Facility, often called the Honor Farm, which is out on Airport Boulevard near Sonoma County Airport. We house our low and medium security inmates out there. Those are inmates who typically have been convicted of a DUI, and their judge has ordered them to spend, say, 90 days in jail. So you're going to find drunk driving people, maybe bad check writers, non-violent criminals are going to be housed up there to do their time. And those people up there have a huge incentive not to leave the Honor Farm because if they leave, their misdemeanor conviction now turns into a felony conviction for escape. And so they have a lot to lose. So actually at our Honor Farm, we have probably 40 inmates every day walk out the front door because they're on what we call work release. They go to work during the daytime and they come back and sleep at the jail at night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more?
I'm going to stay here afterwards, so if anybody has any questions, I will stay as long as you want to talk to me.
Mine's quick. What's your assessment of the role, the duties of the sheriff? You know, I grew up watching Western, so I have one view on it. But
Sure.
Kind of percentage basis, what's the sheriff do today? This is a big job.
Sure, it's a huge job. $180 million budget, huge. We are a huge government organization. We have over 650 employees, and when you throw volunteers in there, we have about 720 people every day that are working towards the sheriff's office mission. Constitutionally, we really only have one job. Well, we have two jobs as a sheriff's office under the California Constitution. We have to operate a jail, and we have to serve the civil processes ordered by the court. So those are the two huge jobs that we have in the Constitution. However, there's a third part under the Constitution that says the sheriff shall maintain order in the county. Very vague, kind of open. So that's where we get our patrol division from. That's where you have sheriff's deputies that are on patrol. Just to put it in perspective for you real quickly, of the 500,000 residents that live in our county, about 180,000 of them live in the unincorporated areas. So our service population, the population the sheriff's office serves for law enforcement services, is about 180,000 people. And that means that when you pick up the phone and call 911 because there's an emergency at your house and you live in an unincorporated area, you're going to get a deputy to your house. And what we call our priority one response time is about 8.5 minutes. Not nearly as good if you live in downtown Petaluma. If you call 911 in Petaluma, you'll probably have a cop at your house in under 4 minutes. Obviously, we patrol a huge area. Geographically, we had to drive longer distances. But we're really proud of our response time, considering how big our population is. So it's our basic fundamental mission is public safety.
Thank you.
Somebody asked what it is. We're getting speakers to our speakers. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I wanted to say seriously that we, on behalf of the club and everybody, greatly appreciate all that you do and all the men and women in law enforcement. It's a tough job, dangerous job, as what happened yesterday in Sacramento. A deputy was killed, 2 CHP officers, and then the officer in Houston who passed away going to rescue people. So we greatly appreciate what you do every day, 24/7, 365. So thank you very much. Yeah, good job. So thank you for all the guests that were here today. The guests were here and the visiting Rotarians. Joanne, congratulations on Rotarian of the Month. Have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Stay cool. It's going to be a hot one. So we are going to be meeting next Thursday. So anyway, thanks again. It's a joy to be a member of this club. You're a wonderful group of people. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Thank you.